Chapter 1. Survival of the Kindest. Like most of you, probably my story begins with my parents. They came to Canada from Vietnam, but they're actually Chinese because my grandparents moved to Vietnam. When the Vietnam War broke, my mom and dad had to escape from the country. After that, they traveled over much of Asia as displaced people. Then, at some point in the 70s, they came to Canada. Here's the kicker. My parents didn't know each other when they landed. Both of them were in their late teens when they met in Canada. My dad worked as a waiter at a Chinese restaurant, and my mom working there as a waitress. It was inevitable their paths would cross. They hooked up, got married, and a few years later, my brother was born. 6 years after that, I popped out. I was born at Edmonton's Royal Alexandra Hospital in 1989. Back then, the city had a population of less than 1 million people. And that's roughly a quarter of the population of Los Angeles, or the number of residents in the average one-bedroom apartment in Beijing. Many of those people were Asian immigrants too. Chinese, Viet, Laos, Filipino, you name them, we got them. There were only 2 elementary schools near my home, J.A. Fife and Kildare. Kildare would have been a half an hour walk away, but J.A. Fife was just across the street and 1 alley away from the house. Now, to me, there was a massive difference between them though. Kildare had a Chinese immersion program and J.A. Fife didn't, so naturally I ended up going to J.A. Fife. At Fife, I was just a handful of Asian students going to a predominantly white school. That meant the friends I made were all white, and as a result, I learned a lot about white culture, mannerisms, and even food. It wasn't the rice and veggies. It was meat and potatoes or pasta. The way kids were disciplined was different too. In Chinese culture, you would never talk back. Being hit was normal as a kid, whereas it's frowned upon in Western culture. My parents never had time to absorb Western culture or pop culture, so growing up with them meant that I was immersed in Eastern values at home, but I was surrounded by Western values elsewhere. I didn't know what sports Canada played or even what sports was. I had no idea what hockey or soccer or baseball or even football were. I was born into a typical poor immigrant family. My mom cleaned tables and toilets, and my dad waited tables. There's really not much glamour there. I went to an elementary school every day where I stood out like a sore thumb, and every Saturday I went to Chinese school at 8 a.m. and every Sunday we'd go to Chinese temple because there was food served after prayer. The temple also acted as a daycare and babysitting service. And if we couldn't be at school or temple, my dad would just take us to the restaurant where he worked, and our other nice aunties and uncles would look after us. Before my brother and I could play in the restaurant, my dad would have us set tables, dry chopsticks, and keep things neat and tidy. We were the best type of child labor. Free! Now, when it comes to Chinese food, here's my best and biased advice. The best Chinese food comes from these 3 trade secrets. Once you've recognized it, tried it, you'll never look back. Number 1, the restaurant has been shut down by the health inspector at least twice in a year. The dirtier the Chinese restaurant, the more authentic it is. That's facts. Number 2, when you walk in, you will need to see children playing at the one corner table that customers never use. Also, you gotta watch out for their babysitter, who's the grandma, and also is the oldest looking human being on the planet. She's so old that she takes her time to breathe. And bonus tip, the older the grandma looks, the deeper the roots have in that restaurant. And last but not least, number 3, the parking lot lines are just there for show. So whenever you try to park in front of a Chinese restaurant, you usually can't because the patrons need a maximum space for exiting their vehicle. So you'll usually have to park across the street and then walk to the restaurant. And also, when you see these 3 things at the Chinese restaurant, you will know that it's the best in the city. When we weren't free labor at the restaurant or getting free daycare at the temple, my brother and I mainly grew up at our aunt's house. So you see, we barely even lived at home. All our parents did was work and work and work. My mom would drop us off at our aunt's house when she had to go to school or do a night shift. Nothing out of the ordinary for a surviving immigrant family, but we still found ways to have fun. My favorite sport in elementary was soccer baseball. It's kind of a dumbed down version of baseball for uncoordinated kids. So instead of using a bat to hit a small white ball, you kick a large red rubber ball. The pitcher rolls the ball forward towards you, and your job is not to Charlie Brown and fall on your ass. Another sport I learned in elementary was red ass. All you need for this game is a ball and a wall. The rules of red ass is simple. You throw a tennis ball against a wall, and another kid has to catch it after it bounces. Then they throw it back at the wall. You alternate catching and throwing until someone messes up. If you attempt to catch the ball and you fumble it or it touches you, your ass is literally on the line. You immediately have to run and touch the wall to be safe, while behind you the other players are running towards the ball to grab it to attempt to hit the wall before you touch it. If the ball gets to the wall before you do, you're the red ass. Then you have to face the wall, bend over, present your ass while the other kids throw the ball at it from a distance. If they hit you, you're out. If you grew up in North America, maybe you dreamed of playing the NHL or NFL, and the best I could hope for as an ignorant Chinese kid is to be a professional red ass player. And that wouldn't hold up because, first, my parents have zero clue what that means, and second, there's no such thing as a professional league for red ass. If you Googled professional red ass, you'd probably get some sort of spanking type of porn site. I wouldn't know. I never made it in pro red ass, but I've got no regrets. The biggest challenges for my family and for my parents was the finances. It was extremely difficult to send my brother and I into organized sports, hockey, soccer, or other clubs because they were expensive, the memberships, the uniform, the equipment costs. This one time, my mom got me a pair of ice skates and took me to a local ice rink. We thought that since it was outside, it would be free, and you could just show up and start skating. My mom dropped me off, I strapped on my skates and went onto the ice. As I was skating around, an old guy came up and started yelling at me to get off because I didn't have this special skate tag that meant I could use the ice rink. Yep, I got kicked off the ice rink at 6 years old, and to this day, I still don't know how to ice skate. That old man ended my skating career. What a dick. Growing up with immigrant parents was kind of shitty. Mom was always working or taking night classes, and dad was working restaurant hours, so he was never home during the evenings. And I'll be honest, I didn't really get to know my mom and dad until my late teens, even though we lived under the same roof. My parents were more like my roommates, except they were obligated to keep me alive. When I look back at my childhood, though, I think I got the perfect amount of neglect. My mom and dad worked their asses off to support my brother and I. And even though they worked a lot, they spoiled us so much as they could with their limited time and money. My dad had worked his way from being a waiter to being a general manager at a restaurant, and my mom worked her way up from cleaning toilets and waitressing to finishing school, learning English, and became a travel agent. Thanks to them, I was fortunate enough to visit Vietnam at 8 years old, and that was pretty cool, considering most kids don't get to travel overseas. Then again, Vietnam is no Disneyland, especially in the 90s. In truth, my parents were literally paying money to travel back in time to live in poverty for 4 weeks. That's some vacation. Still, the fact that they could afford to do that had a lot to do with my aunts and uncles and grandmas and grandpas who took care of my brother and I when my parents were working. Still, the fact that they could actually afford to do that had a lot to do with my aunts and my uncles and my grandmas and my grandpas who took care of my brother and I when my parents were working. When my mom would drop us off at someone's house, we only had one rule, 就叻仔. It's a Chinese phrase that means be a good kid. Because my mom used this phrase so often, it played a huge role in shaping me as a kid. The fact that I was surrounded by different people whom I had to be a good kid around made me a pretty good kid. I'd say my hellos and my goodbyes and my please and my thank yous, and I tried my best not to be a brat. I also knew that if I fucked up, I'd get a beating, so there was the fear factor as well. Over time, 就叻仔 trickled down into all aspects of my life, and it helped me make pretty good friends. During our time of scarcity, there wasn't a lot of food at home, so my dad would do his best to bring some food back from the restaurant. However, since he worked late nights, we could only eat dinner at about 9 p.m. or whenever he got home. Leftovers would be lunch for my brother and I for the next day, and we never ate breakfast. When I started making friends in elementary, being a good kid worked in my favor. I was likable, I would trade lunches or even snacks for free from the other kids. I played with them during recess, got invited to their birthday parties. Most of the kids I went to school with lived nearby. And the more I hung out with them, the more I get to hang out with them after school. I get invited to the homes and we played Super Nintendo, jump on the trampoline, run outside, just normal kid stuff. At some point, I noticed that my friends had something I didn't have, a parent at home. That was a normal thing for them. I wasn't envious or upset that my parents were always working, but I realized that I must have always looked hungry because the more I hung out with my friends after school, the more food I was offered. My favorite phrase from my friends' parents was, "Would you like to stay over for supper?" "Fuck yeah, I would love to stay over for supper," was what went through my head. But since I was a good boy, I said, "Yes, please." This was the first time I can remember being aware of my environment and learning to adapt to it. Kids are clever, they figure out how to cheat the system. In my case, I discovered that if I was likable, I got to have fun with friends, drink soda, eat free food. I won the childhood lottery. I now know this is a universal joy, enjoyed by adults too. I mean, why do most people show up to a company Christmas party? It's because it's free. You get liquored up, you eat all you want, and you don't pay for anything. It's a win-win-win. I had so many friends that I planned my supper schedule around them. On Mondays, I would go to Chris's house. On Tuesday, it was Garrett's. Wednesday, Brian. Thursday, Steve. Friday, I ate at Nick's. I saved my parents the trouble of feeding me through elementary school by being the kindest, the most loving and endearing mooch ever. The trouble with having so many friends was that I started slacking in my schoolwork, right? Makes sense. Wouldn't you rather hang out with your friends than do homework? As a result, I was just a B plus to a C minus student. I wasn't going to be a doctor or a lawyer. I didn't really get into trouble in class, but I never got recognized for anything either. I definitely walked the line though. I started hanging out with the cool kids who were also the troublemakers. I learned how to cheat on tests, and if I failed the quiz, I would forge my mom's signature so it looked like she saw my grades. While I'm confessing to a PG-13 delinquent shit, I'll also admit to stealing coins from my dad's coin jar to buy candy or Pokemon cards. What I really want to acknowledge here, though, is how much I learned from the people around me. Whether it was watching my mom and dad work at the restaurant and struggling and building abundance, going to visit Chinese temples and interacting with my aunts and my uncles and my grandmas and my grandpas over there, or just seeing my friends and their parents, and even the troublemakers at school, my upbringing gave me such an amazing education. Then something happened that changed my childhood. I discovered skateboarding. My elementary school had one of those outdoor cement water parks where the water would only flow during the summer. It had a flower-themed super soaker, stationary water guns, misting station, and a large wheelbarrow that would soak you with water. This being Edmonton, though, the most memorable thing about this water park was that for most of the year, there's no water in it. As I walked home from school, I would see these older kids skateboarding there. To me, it was this massive concrete jungle. There was a large extended 3-stair, a ledge with a huge big drop at the end, and a cement wheelchair ramp that was the perfect height to grind. The entire park had these perfect ledges that surrounded it. To me, it seemed like the world's greatest place. Watching these older kids throw themselves off obstacles or land a flip trick on a piece of wood with 4 wheels was the most awesome thing ever. They were so fucking cool, I just wanted to be them. I remember begging my mom to buy me a skateboard. I didn't want anything else, just a skateboard. When she finally got me one, it was one of those $20 shitty no-name brands. Yet, I loved it and I used that board until it broke. For the first time in my life, I was obsessed with something. I learned by watching and asking and trying, and slowly I started to get better and better. I would buy skateboarding magazines using the money I stole from my dad, and read the articles over and over and over. Fun fact, I still have those magazines. I must have a bit of that Chinese hoarder blood inside of me. Skateboarding was the perfect activity for me. I knew how financially limited my parents were at the time, and I just remember hearing them fight about money while my brother and I were in the next room playing Super Nintendo. Learning how to skateboard was cheap. The one barrier to entry was space. If you could just find a patch of cement, you could skateboard. Imagine being one of those few Chinese kids in a mostly white elementary school, learning how to skateboard at a water park with a bunch of pot-smoking degenerate high school kids. Loved it. I absolutely loved it. It was different from what normal kids were doing. Skateboarding allowed me to run away from home without actually running away from home, and it was the best thing that my environment gave to me, and I took full advantage of it. I started to hang out with those skateboarding kids every day, and I learned important life lessons, like how to set garbage cans on fire, how to egg cards. I never touched pot, but I did learn that smoking cigarettes was not my thing. One of those kids even gave me my first Playboy magazines, and from it, I learned to appreciate tits and ass. Those were the glory days. Not a care in the world. We were just kids skateboarding and doing stupid shit with each other. That group of skateboarders, the community, was the best thing to have ever happened to me. It was the best self-development tool for my upbringing and for my life. Here's why. Skateboarding is as real as it gets. I love how primitive the hierarchy is and the amount of skill it takes to be great at it. This is how I believe skateboarding directly bridges my career in sales and entrepreneurship. You can't fake skill. The coolest skateboarders were the ones that were the best at the park. If you had no skill, you had no presence. Nobody cared If you had the nicest skateboard or the clothes or the shoes, you would just be a poser. Skateboarding is all about the action and the tricks. You can't talk about skateboarding. Either you do the tricks or you can't. If I wanted to be the cool kid in skateboarding, I needed the skill, and that was undeniable. Talk less, skate more. Skateboarding taught me so many things about being creative, having resiliency, being confident, consistency, failure, camaraderie, work ethic, problem solving, dreaming, goal setting, and visualization. It taught me the value of skill, delayed gratification, and the ability to believe in yourself. I learned about consistency. Even if you land a trick once, you have to tell yourself, I need to do it 10 out of 10 times. If you can't land the trick, you failed. Yet, the process of these little micro failures teaches you mental resiliency and the ability to delay your gratification until you land it. The satisfaction that you get when you finally land a trick that you have attempted 1,000 times is amazing. I received a sense of camaraderie with the other skateboarders because they wanted me to get better. They cheered me on when I attempted a crazy trick, and they wanted me to set the bar higher and higher. I got creative with skateboarding. I started to look at things differently. I started approaching obstacles or challenges with a different mindset. I dreamed and I visualized how to land a trick. I set goals on what trick I wanted to achieve that week, that month, or over the summer. I got coaching by the better skateboarders. It taught me to never give up, and if I couldn't land a trick, I would literally attempt it every day until I landed it. It taught me how to be fearless and courageous. If you're just hucking yourself down a flight of stairs while attempting a kickflip, you have to be a little bit crazy and truly believe in yourself. It taught me to grow and get better, and you spent countless hours and days just trying to land a trick that gives you seconds of satisfaction. And most of all, skateboarding was fun, and it continues to be fun. Everything I listed off about personal development is something you could read online or buy in the bookstore, and you can even pay a coach to tell you the same thing. I didn't read about how to be a better skateboarder. I went out and I worked at it. To use business as an example, you can't just read on how to start a business. You literally need to do it. There's no half-assing it. Either you start one or you don't. Starting a business doesn't mean you need it to have $1 million to open it. It's just executing the idea you have in your head. It's learning on a $20 skateboard and not waiting to get a $200 skateboard before you start. It's the same as developing a new skill. You can't just think about something you want to be good at because you either do it or you can't. It's like either you land the trick or you can't. To do anything, you just got to start and keep working at it until you get it. Everything you do during the process will teach you about yourself, but you got to start somewhere. So here's the fun part. You don't need to be famous or the cool kid to execute your dreams or your goals or your aspirations. You just need to know that someone out there has done it before. You don't need to know their name or where they're from. You just need to know that it's been done before and it's your turn to do it. Like the satisfaction of landing your first kickflip, you have the satisfaction of starting your first venture, to learn how to play the guitar, to start a vlog, to learn a new language, travel to a foreign country. How far you want to take it is completely up to you. My environment taught me how to be a good human being because if I wasn't a good kid, I didn't eat. But skateboarding honed in on the life skills that allowed my kindness to shine bright, which I eventually used for my career. Although this was a story about my upbringing, just take a step back, dig deep into your own. What skill can you recognize that you earned and can appreciate? Can you acknowledge the challenges you're facing and also overcome them? There is perspective in everything we do. I just had to dig deep into my own upbringing, identify who I am today, and just because I'm a 29-year-old man-child doesn't mean I should disown myself of a dream or aspiration. I might not be a pro skateboarder, but the joy and the fun of skateboarding as a kid transferred over to my businesses and my attitude towards life's obstacle. I look at the same problems you have, but just with my unique perspective. So just time to have some fun and make some money. Chapter 1 Summary. Recognize that great Chinese food comes from the health inspector shutting down the restaurant not once but twice for being dirty. There's a really old looking grandma watching over the children at the back corner table and you just can't park in the parking lot. Bonus. If you decide to park your vehicle in the parking lot, Check your doors for dents and scratches. And if you are not of Chinese descent, expect that the moment you want someone to be held responsible for the damages to your vehicle, it will just so happen that magically no one in that restaurant will be able to speak English anymore. If you're a kind and good human being, you can mooch off people for a long time. Always attend your company Christmas party for free food, booze, and fun. And if the booze isn't free, always pre-drink. Last but not least, go skateboarding and land a kickflip.